It makes me do things like, no matter the argument or whoever I've talked to, right? So say I've had a fight with a family member on the phone, we've screamed at each other for 10 minutes. I never get off the phone without telling them I love them, because I hear too many stories of people who wish they'd done it differently.
Hi, you're listening to Sam and Em Solve the World's Problems.
As usual, Sam has a lot of problems.
Come on, man. Today we're going to be talking about death and how it's perceived in culture and in different cultures. And we're also going to be talking about
what it's like to be a funeral director and deal with grief on a daily basis. Today we're speaking to a funeral director who has a Bachelor of Theology, majoring in pastoral care, and is coming up on 3 years in the industry.
Yeah, and because it's kind of a sensitive industry, we are going to be referring to him as the one and only Gravy Boat.
Yep, just for confidentiality reasons.
Yeah. We're super excited about this episode and we're really glad to have him here. Please welcome to the podcast, Gravy Boat.
Welcome to the podcast, Gravy Boat.
Thanks for having me. They always told me I had a face for radio, so this is ideal, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here, especially to talk about, this is a pretty, it's weird to say that I'm excited to talk about these topics.
I'm genuinely nervous because I don't like these topics.
I'm keen because I find it so fascinating, but at the same time, yeah, I think, well, we may as well get straight into it.
Just as a little precursor there, I hate gruesome things and I really don't want to talk about that today. So if you're also in that boat, well, it's a safe space, hopefully.
And this might actually help with that, I think.
I think it might.
I can handle talking about death. I just can't handle talking about the logistics of a dead body. That grosses me out a little bit.
You guys are a pretty good cross-section of the people I come across to. So the people, in 90% of situations, it either goes, oh, you're a funeral director? Cool. And then the conversation ends, or someone has 400 questions. So
yeah,
you guys pretty much match what the community has going.
We're the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So to get to that, our guest today, Gravy Boat, is a funeral director.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking a lot about death today. And how long have you been a funeral director?
Coming on 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. Nice.
And you have a degree in theology?
That's right, with a major in pastoral care, which is essentially a major in like counselling or something like that. Yeah, I did that part-time, moved to Sydney from a faraway place to do that, and it took me a little while, but I'm glad I finished it. Uni's hard, so
yep.
I know that you guys know that. And it took me a few different career changes, but now I'm in the career that I love and I wouldn't change for anything. Most fulfilling job I've ever had. So, yeah.
It certainly sounds like something that would be really fulfilling. I mean,
I'm tempted to ask about like how you got to that, because I mean, there's so many people who like are struggling to find their own career, and like, you know, funeral directing is kind of a niche thing that you wouldn't necessarily like, oh, my dream as a 3-year-old is to be a funeral director. Niche.
I don't think anyone dreams of being it when they grow up.
Yeah.
But
just imagine a classroom of like, I'm going to be an astronaut, I'm going to be a fireman, funeral director.
So I pretty much was really unhappy in the job that I was doing, and was surfing Seek and saw a job for a funeral director, and I was like, you know what, I'd be really good at that, and I guess I am. I hope I am.
I imagine you would be.
I hope I am.
Yeah.
They tell me I am.
I'm sure you are. We've got a few listener questions about like what the logistics of being a funeral director looks like. I don't know if you want to touch on sort of like day-to-day role.
Yeah.
And then we can chat into the listener questions.
We the funeral director industry is infamous for saying we do everything. So we pretty much go everything from picking up someone who's passed away from a nursing home, hospital, the coroner or wherever. Then we meet with the families, we plan the service, do the event management side of it all.
And because you're like so perfectly qualified for this, because I think before that you were in event management. So you kind of had a theology degree and you had event management experience.
Yeah, I did. So there was, running catering companies and stuff like that. So that was definitely helps me in organising my time and other people's time. We meet with the families and plan it all, liaise with priests and ministers of all different religions and musicians, printers, audiovisual people. Sometimes we go as far as, literally organising a concert level type thing where we're speakers and stages and lecterns and live streaming and all that kind of stuff. And then once it's all organised, we will often go out on the service and actually provide the literal funeral service to the family and make sure everything gets done, take all the names, stand watch on everything that's really happening. And so, yeah, it's very varied. And then even there's still work to do after the funeral too. So we register the death with birth certificates, marriages, follow up with the family, make sure everything's all good. And then, of course, because it is a business, we're chasing the cash at the end of it. So there's no kind of, you never finish with a family in funerals.
You never finish with a family?
Yeah, because they'll always come back for something else they need. There's always something more, or sometimes in the unfortunate circumstances, they're back in a few months for another relative, which is... I
guess that's one of the only industries you don't really necessarily want repeat customers, right? Like
that's right. So we do say that to people. we literally say to people, look, it's been an honour to look after you and your family. We hope we won't have to see you anytime soon.
Yeah.
They usually leaves them with a bit of a laugh, so that's it.
Yeah, you're not giving out punch cards for free funerals.
No, it's not like the hairdresser where you get a stamp.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No.
Thanks. We'll see you at 25% off here and 50% off here. No.
Yeah, fair enough.
But, I mean, we do look after families that continue to come back because we do appreciate those kind of people, and we hope that each time they come, we do a good job for them, and
Yeah, that's like a really good insight. It sounds a lot like the event planning and then tied in with a lot of, I guess, counselling almost.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it counselling as...
Maybe more like ministry?
It's almost like it's a balance between being really involved and being super helpful and doing everything they need you to do and being there for them. And
are you ever like a punching bag?
Yeah, quite often we are. So if something little goes wrong, it's often the funeral director who cops the hit rather than the supplier or whoever else was actually responsible. We also end up being, if people are angry about the death for whatever reason, you'll find that everything's an issue, and it can be quite difficult for those people to see past us as the funeral director as an outlet for that. But I mean, we love everyone the same when they come in the door, and we... I was
going to say, you can't take that personally, can you?
No, we have to... It's really... being in funerals, you really have to be able to separate yourself from those things.
Yeah, that kind of ties in perfectly with our first problem. Do you want to get into that now? Do you want to go to another listener?
We haven't answered either of the listener questions yet, so we better do those quickly, and then we'll go into that problem.
Yeah, that was the overview.
That was the overview. So is it you who collects the dead body, basically, when it happens?
Well, it depends on the size of your funeral home, but yeah. That's the thing about funeral directing is that every day you never kind of know what you're walking into day to day. So, yeah.
Okay, so hold on.
Is it usually you, or is it usually
so usually it would be my colleagues, but when you first start out as a funeral director, you spend a lot of time doing what we call transfers, which is picking up people from where they've passed away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So paint a picture for me. Someone's dead. I guess, most common scenario, is it a nursing home? You get a call from a nursing home.
Yeah, so it's probably 50-50 nursing homes and hospitals
of course,
would be the most common. The least common, of course, is the coroner, which is where someone has died in generally a tragic circumstance or an unknown circumstance.
Yeah.
So if someone passes away at a hospital or nursing home, we usually know why they've passed away. Whereas if they get referred to the coroner, it's always a question of what caused the incident.
Right,
Yeah.
so the hospital or whichever location will call you to come pick it up.
Yeah, them.
Pick.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
they're still
I didn't even. I was like, what happened in that sentence that was wrong? I didn't even pick up on it.
I'm like, they're not a person anymore.
No, they are.
No,
They are though, right?
Yeah.
So we, so it's a nursing home. Nursing homes generally don't have the facilities to look after a dead body for very long. So we'll get out to a nursing home relatively quickly versus a hospital where they might stay there for a few days because they have the facilities to look after them. So that we'll get a call, we'll take details about the family, who's going to come in, but dates of birth, etc., etc. Then we head on out. Usually two people go out, unless it's someone rather large. And then we'll send 3 or 4.
This whole episode is going to be me and Emily sitting here going...
But this is exactly why we're doing this, because normalise death.
Yeah, and
Right.
Yeah, it's important to normalise death, really, guys. It is. It's
Okay.
It makes. Sorry, back to the thing.
Yeah, I was going to move on to the next question, but
we get into a van, we drive out, we meet whoever's in charge at the hospital or
Wait.
whatever.
Is the body in the back, or have
Not
you done?
yet.
If you
No,
put,
no.
If you put it to the side?
No. So we leave the office or wherever we are once
Yeah.
we get the call.
Got
we
it.
go pick them up. So in New South Wales, it's law that everyone has to be transported in a body bag. So you can't move anyone without putting them in a body bag, which can be, if you're at a home or something, can be quite traumatic for families to witness. So, it's like a big plastic bag, so there's a lot of noise and it's not really pretty sometimes when we
Hard to be
do it.
sensitive.
Well, I mean, we do it with the most sensitivity we can, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not... if you're a funeral director who loses the sensitivity, you may as well leave the industry. Like, there's no good reason to be a funeral director who doesn't care. So, yeah. And then, we put them in a body bag, and we usually take a nice cloth with us that goes over the stretcher that they're on, and we take them back to the funeral home. So, yeah.
When I don't even know what part of the process a cadaver, okay, how do you dress a cadaver is our next listener question. I don't even know what part of the process that happens in.
All right. So, generally, we don't do that until probably 1 or 2 days before the service. The reason for that is that things happen to bodies.
Things?
As they...
Like decomposition.
It's not decomposition in that stage necessarily, but...
Nature happens to bodies.
Let's call it leakage.
Oh, no, let's not. Let's not at all call it that.
All right,
Let's move on swiftly.
Okay, swiftly moving on. So we don't dress until 1 or 2 days before the service, because otherwise the clothes that we dress them in probably get
Gross.
stuff on them.
Yep. Copy that. All right. Let's move on to the next problem.
So dressing a body is not as bad as you think. It's like kind of in the same way you would dress a small child. You maneuver the arms and the legs to where they need to be. It's not as unfamiliar as you might think.
Okay, I feel like we've covered a lot of like the logistic type physical
if you
kind
have
of
any
aspects.
other questions, sorry, but we're not talking about them.
Sorry, listeners, but they're running away from the questions.
No, I think it's important to cover both sides. I think I want to move more into the emotional kind of side.
We want
of
to talk
dealing
about
with
the other side more.
Yeah, and I guess the first kind of problem I wanted to talk about today was the how I kind of wanted to do a pulse check on how we deal with, pun not intended, of how we deal with death as a society and as a culture, and compare it to how other people deal with it. And, can you give us a grading or a rating of like how you think we process it?
All right, so
as Australians?
Yeah, I guess in our kind of context.
well, it has
for
to
our
be
listeners.
it has to be graded on your culture, your background, right? So, as white Caucasian wasps or whatever you want to call us, I think that we don't process death as well as other cultures do.
I think it's pretty repressed, right?
Yeah, so it's like almost a fear of death and a fear of the body itself.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, you can't relate to that at all, Ems. So
I'm scared of real human bodies that are gross just as much as I'm scared of dead bodies that are gross.
yeah, exactly. So I reckon, so white, I don't know, English background type cultures are definitely afraid of death, and I think the theory is that a lot of that is related to like the Black Plague and stuff. So it's kind of ingrained in the white cultures to distance yourself from death and bodies because of the risk of catching something from them. So yeah, that's a big part of it. Whereas you find in like Sri Lankan, Indian type cultures, they are very wanting to very much involved in the process. They may even want to dress their loved one after they've passed. Same with Islander cultures. A lot of their part of their funeral process is dressing and viewing and taking that body actually back to their home with them, and spending, like, sometimes we take people from, say, Tonga back to their family home for like a whole weekend, and the body stays there.
Do you think
often at the week for the whole weekend?
Because I was going to say, there's no way that I have ever heard of that. I don't think I've ever seen a dead body in my life, because it's always been so.
I do remember, though, when my granddad died, my uncle, which is my granddad's son, his wife is from New Caledonia, and she struggled because he died here in Sydney, and she had a very different approach to wanting to sort of grieve that. Yeah. And she wanted to stay, and we all wanted to go, and it was very hard for her at that time. Yeah,
so especially the Pacific Island nations, they will want to literally sleep next to the
do you
person
know
who's
the
passed
meaning
away.
behind that? Why they want to do that?
Not particularly. It's just about spending as much time with that person as they can before they move on to the next phase.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. You'd have to do some research, but yeah.
It's interesting. Because, it's definitely, I don't know what's the healthiest way to deal, and I don't know that anyone does. I'm sure there are experts on it, but yeah, I feel like the amount that we cover it up, I don't know if it's the best way to deal with it.
I don't know. I wouldn't say covering it up, right? So we're not afraid to tell people that someone's died because, like,
But I mean, like, the actual dead body and stuff.
But we also don't talk about, like, ourselves dying very well, do we? Like,
not particularly. So you won't find many people who can walk into a funeral home and be like, I talked to Dad about this heaps of times. He wanted this, and this, and this. You'll find people who say, Dad never wanted to talk about it. He never wanted to talk about death, but that kind of stuff. But once again, in like some Asian cultures, Sri Lankan, Indian type cultures, there's this almost assumption of how the funeral will go. That there'll be a viewing, there'll be a rosary, which is like a pre-mass for Catholics, then we'll have an open casket at the funeral, and then we'll have for like Sri Lankans, they'll do what's called a witness insertion, is where the family literally watch the body being put into the cremator, which is, that's what they do, right? So whereas in India, like when they do funerals, they'll actually do them on the banks of the Ganges River, and they'll build big funeral pyres, and so it'll be like a whole bunch of wood, then the body, and then a whole bunch of more wood. And so there'll be literally like a foot or something like sticking out of this fire as it's cremated. So
I feel like we should be live streaming my face this whole conversation because it's doing lots of things.
It should just be your face.
It's funny to be in the room.
Yeah. So like we do specific trainings and stuff with like experts in certain cultures, and we did one with the Hindu Council of Australia, I think, and they pretty much said, "Yeah, you white guys, you're all scared of death." And then he like clicked a button on the mouse, and there was this picture of a funeral in India with like half a body hanging out of this funeral pyre, which is like, for us as funeral directors, we weren't particularly worried about it, but like for your average person, it's not really.
No, I'm sure you would have seen a reaction on my face if you'd shown me that photo.
Yeah. How do you manage like the culture here is that we, be very discreet and we be very like respectful of the whole thing. Like, do you find that that's a hard sort of line to walk?
No, I think that respect for the dead is like universal, right? There's no culture that treats their loved ones or those who've passed on as anything more than their most treasured possessions. It's really comforting, in fact, that everyone treats their loved ones with the utmost respect and that kind of stuff. As funeral directors ourselves, it is a fine line sometimes. funeral directors can talk to funeral directors in a certain way that you just can't talk to people outside of the industry. I mean, you guys know you've had conversations with me before, and I've just kind of thrown something out, and you've been like, "Sorry, what?"
Leakage.
Leakage. For
Should have
example,
got my face on that.
So, it's a fine line, and mostly I balance that with like close family members. You practice, right? You practice, talking about work and that kind of thing because,
when I was going to say when I separate my work life like from personal life, I might throw in a word like quick wins or something from a business meeting, and people will just give it like a side eye. But if you do it, I imagine the situation is completely different.
Yeah, words like leakage, especially. Yeah. Right. So.
Not a good enough reason to use the word leakage.
Nope.
Yeah, so it's and it's a balance that I don't think any funeral director always hits the nail on the head with. It's people say we spend most of our time when we're awake at work, right? So it's certainly difficult. Initially when you first start as a funeral director, you're so interested in, I was so interested in every aspect of what's happening. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Did you know that this happens?
Well, it's so hard. Like no one knows. Like it's so hidden.
Yeah, but I'm fine in my little bubble.
I gotta be honest. Yeah, I don't necessarily need to know all the ins and outs.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to find out.
Yeah. And so I'd like go home and when I tell people about it, tell my family and my friends, and people are like, dude, you gotta stop, eh? Like, I'm wearing steak right now. No, you can't.
Oh, man.
But yeah, so there's certainly a fine line in there of what it certainly makes it hard to talk about work. Like I said, 90% of people, what do you do for work? I go, I'm a funeral director. And it's split right down the middle. People go, sorry, what? And just like kind of freak out and go, oh, cool. Yeah. All right. Or then there's like the Sams who just like, oh my God, I've always wondered, do you know what happens? Do people really do they take them out of, do they resell coffins? Like, is that a real thing? And you're like, dude, no. Like, stop watching The Current Affair for God's sake.
Yeah, I didn't believe that either.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
totally did.
Speaking of fine line between like business and personal, it kind of is a perfect segue into our next problem. Oh my God, I love those guys.
I know. When those two talk to that person about that thing.
Specifically that one.
It was so good. I loved it.
Look, we're just here interrupting to tell you to please share this with some friends.
Yeah, if you could just like tell 3 friends about this podcast, that would mean the world to us. Alternatively, you could post about us on your social media. That would also be very helpful. It would be more than 3 friends who would sort of get that word of mouth. But yeah, that would be really helpful for us.
And that's all we really need to say. So yeah, if you could help support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, that would be amazing, and we love you.
Yeah. Back to those super awesome people talking about that super awesome thing.
Love the chat about that thing. Em, do you want to lead into this one?
Yeah. We have a listener question on... Actually, the question is, how do you... I mean, I guess it's the same for sort of funeral directors and psychologists and all those kind of people who deal with hard sort of emotional stuff. How can you, like, separate... How can you watch people in a funeral being so sad and crying all the time and then not, like, internalize that and want to cry yourself all the time, basically?
Yeah, so it's... You cry a lot the first few weeks, I'll tell you that. So There's no desensitization to it. It's more compartmentalization, right? So when you're working, and like anyone, sometimes you'll just be sitting there, watching a funeral happen, and you'll tear up, or it'll remind you of a friend who's passed or a loved one who's passed, and it'll affect you. But in most situations, we're quite busy, so we're moving around. Even while the funeral's happening, we're getting ready for what's happening at the end, to packing up and those kind of things. So it's not like we're just kind of standing there watching the whole service the whole time. And yeah, so it it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. And, you know, songs that you love, you know, someone will play it during a slideshow and it'll make you tear up. You know those songs that give you goosebumps, and then you throw a bit of little sadness on it and it just kind
Do they ruin it for you?
No, it doesn't ruin it.
Okay.
No, doesn't ruin it at all. No, but it's hard. Yeah, it's a hard line, and it gets easier as you go along. So for like the first year, I stopped watching the slideshows, like the video presentations with the music, and I stopped listening to the eulogies because that kind of helped me disconnect from that a bit. Whereas now I've got a bit more experience in it, so I try to engage in that in a more positive way without getting myself upset, and just like try to understand what an amazing life that person had. And, you know, hearing these stories of people climbing to Everest Base Camp, you know, with one leg, or, you know, these amazing stories of the things that I would want to be remembered for if I had achieved them, and kind of internalizing those things of how that person did amazing things with the time that they had here.
Yeah.
So that's there's a balance there between disconnecting from the service itself and still being present in the moment to honor that person. It's a hard line. Yeah.
Has it made you think differently about how you live your own life?
It makes me do things like I always, no matter the argument or whoever I've talked to, right? So say I've had a fight with a family member on the phone, we've screamed at each other for 10 minutes. I never get off the phone without telling them I love them. So like just consciously, subconsciously.
Yeah.
I always say, look, I love you, but I'm fucking done here. Like, right?
Yeah.
Because I hear too many stories of people who wish they'd done it differently.
Yeah.
So that can be rough.
That's a nice reminder.
Yeah. So like reminding people who are around you what they mean to you. Like I never get off the phone with my wife ever, no matter how angry or how upset, without telling her I love her. And that's one of the big things I've taken from it. Not like, oh, I'm gonna like go climb Everest.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna climb Everest. Nah.
Are you sure, Gravy Boat?
Yeah, I was about to say.
Mate, if they made a PlayStation game about climbing Everest, probably, but other than that. Yeah, so like different perspective on like things as well. Like is it gonna matter when I'm in one of them boxes? Like, you know what I mean?
Right,
like,
yeah, fair enough. So new perspective on like what, material things? And
oh man, I still love material things, don't get me wrong, but like just little stuff like petty arguments and like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm still like a normal person. I still love to like pay out on people and that kind of stuff. But when people do it to me, I just kind of am in a place where I can go,
we're all ending up in the same box.
Yeah.
Well, not everyone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all, people still pay for the box. So
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Might have a nicer box.
So decide who's paying for your funeral and then be real nice to them. And then you'll see how nice your box can be.
Yeah.
That's the key takeaway, guys, from this episode. I'm just going to jump in with another listener question, which is how does it affect your perception of death, especially when it involves someone that you know or love?
Yeah, so I wouldn't have been able to answer this question 6 weeks ago because I hadn't really come across it.
And I was going to ask a similar question because, and I wanted to. Well, I'll let you answer that question first.
So a few weeks ago, I lost my grandfather, who was like pretty much a parent to me. He raised me. He gave me every opportunity, and I was worried. Right, like I was worried at first when I found out that he was dying, that I wasn't going to be able to process that grief, and that I wasn't going to be able to feel that as richly as you need to actually get past someone passing. You got to feel it, right? You got to feel that grief. Numbing it or pushing it aside or whatever doesn't help anyone. Right?
And that's what a funeral is for, right?
That's right. Funerals are for the living, right? It's to help those people say their farewell, say the things they need to say, and get on with their lives, right? So, the main things it meant for me was I was prepared for him to pass, and that when he did pass, I was able to do a few little things, position him nicely and those kind of things. And I was ready to speak to the funeral director. I'd already kind of told them who I was and that he'd already paid for his funeral up beforehand. So that made it a lot easier for our family. But so it was really quite comforting in a weird way that I still felt grief, that I still felt upset. I remember a couple of hours after he passed, it was the first time I'd been by myself, and I got in the car and I just like broke down and was like just in tears. And in that moment, there was a sense of comfort to myself going, well, at least you haven't broken that thing that feels, right? At least you haven't broken that side of you that still feels what it's like to lose someone. So that was a real comfort. In the weeks after, it's been a bit more of a challenge. Once I went back to work, I've it's almost like that has been put in the same box with my work stuff, where only in my really vulnerable moments after a bad day or like that's the only time that really comes to the surface. And I'm not sure that I've processed it as well as I would have had I not been a funeral director. Yeah. So that's been an interesting journey. I was going to
say, it's almost like a constant reminder. You keep going through the process.
No, it's not though, because it's compartmentalized, right? It's work. It's over. It's in.
So even though it's their funerals, you're able to like separate.
Yeah, it's like it is separate because I've trained myself to disconnect from the emotion of funerals in general, and just hear, what I was saying before. So I hear an amazing story and I go, oh wow, that person did something great with their life.
Yeah,
but that's not an emotional response for me necessarily. That's like you're
turning off the feeling side. You're just going to the logical side. You're
that's cool. Like I would love to. I would love to do that. So there's only been a few times in the last few weeks where I've really kind of had a breakdown and been upset, which is a little actually honestly disappointing for me because he deserves so much more in my eyes anyway, right? Like, so I feel like he deserves me to be on my knees catatonic every day, but I can't do that. I've got to go to work, right? So it has to be put in the box and kind of held there, which is not necessarily healthy, I don't think. I guess we'll see as the years come. Like a past guest said, we don't know what these things that we've experienced are going to bring up in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
At some point, we'll probably have to see a psychologist. So we'll see how we go. But
at some point.
But yeah, it's I'm still on that journey, so I don't know.
Yeah,
right?
and I was gonna ask on that vein of having to deal with it personally, because we all have to deal with it at some point. I used to work in a phone store, and everyone would come to me about phone problems. Right, like because everyone has a phone. That if anything went wrong with their phone, they'd be like, "What do I do?" Was it like that when you had to deal with your own personal grief?
No, man. So I had to pretty much just tell my family to get out of the way, and that I knew what I was doing. And
okay,
it was like this drive behind pushing me that was like, you know how to do this the best. Was almost a sense of arrogance coming forward, but where it was like, but it was important to me that I did at my best. Do you know what I mean?
Because you want to honour him by, you've got all these amazing skills for this exact moment. You want to honour him in this way.
Moment.
Yeah.
This is it. Like,
that
so
makes
sense.
My
people in my family whose families who are doctors and nurses, their moment is like looking after him while, when he's sick. And I'm just sitting there being like, Barry, I can't help you until you're not breathing anymore. Right?
Yeah.
And as soon as someone passes, I'm like, boom, I'm in that zone.
Yeah.
So that's and I was probably like, funeral directors hate other funeral directors when you've got to like plan their loved ones' funerals. And I'm sure the people that did my grandfather's funeral would have just been like, oh man, I can't wait till he leaves. It would have been so bad.
Like a wedding planner getting married.
Yeah.
I can imagine that being a nightmare.
It would just be, And I don't apologise for it because I got it exactly how I wanted it.
Perfect, yeah.
So,
and I'm sure that the other funeral directors would understand because they've
right?
been in that situation,
I'm sure
right?
They've been in it themselves. And look, I didn't make it too hard for them. I could have made it harder.
Yeah.
But, it was important for me to use my skills and what I had learned to give him the best send-off that I could. So,
That would have been part of your grief, like part of you.
I think it really was.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was part of that process of just going hard at it and doing it, putting it together, building something that I know he would have loved. And I guess the upside of it was that being a funeral director, I was able to still perform a wedding between the day that he died and the funeral. I was able to still kind of compartmentalise that grief, put it aside and go, well, I've got to do this. I've got to perform this wedding and still have an awesome time. And
and when you say you performed the wedding, you literally married to
as a celebrant,
people.
right? Like doing
the day before you had to then deal with your personal
So well no, not the day before. I had a day gap, so I was able to put that aside and be in that moment and enjoy that wedding and enjoy the love of those people. And still, and then after it, bring that box back out, open it back up and feel that grief again. So,
Yeah, I wonder whether I would be able to do that. I don't know that I could.
I definitely couldn't. I feel things. I couldn't. I don't know how I don't physically know how to put it to the side. Maybe I'll learn that.
And it takes time though, eh? Like I was saying, the first few weeks of funeral director, you cry a lot.
Yeah. Have you like had any like apprentices? Like have you had to train people coming up, and what's that like after?
You can train people to do funeral directing, but you can't train people to be funeral directors. I know that's there's a certain wax off nonsense. Yeah. But what I mean is, you've got to be attitude. You've got to develop your own. How do I be a funeral director? And everyone does it a little bit differently. Some people dive head first in and they get involved with their families and they get to know everyone and they really absorb themselves in it. Some people stay more distant and they're just kind of more efficient, like accountancy style stuff, right? There's like, okay, do we do this and this and this and this and this? And that's how everyone does their style a bit differently. So, and no one really tells you how to deal with the stuff. Funeral directing is a really close industry where we support each other and you've got to be honest with the people you work with. You're like, guys, I'm not coping today. Hey, like didn't sleep. I'm not up to meeting with families today. Just like,
can I say, so is mental health?
Can I swap out and go do something else today? And it's always about flexibility.
So is mental health kind of thought about? I know in my corporate kind of environment, it's not bad, but I feel like it could always be better. Mental health is not ever seen the same as physical health. I don't feel like.
Yeah, so we have...
is it something that has to be talked about a lot?
Yeah, so we have KFC days, right? So, like...
Tell me more, gravy boat.
No, we just have, like, days where people go, oh, man, it's KFC day, and we just order a crap load of KFC, and that's what we have lunch because it's just been... rough. Like everyone's just worn down and stuff's gone wrong. And there's a big focus on mental health in our industry. We are always looking out for each other. We say, that Are You Okay Day comes around. I think it's in September actually.
I've seen notices for it already, yeah.
But as funeral directors, we say every day for us is Are You Okay Day because we have to watch out for our colleagues and we look after each other. And if someone's not coping, there's no, I really need you to finish that. It's like, no, just go. Like, just go take the day or if there's something going on with someone's kids, you're like, no, just go and deal with it. We can pick up the slack because that's what you can't be a funeral director if you're not emotionally available. If you're if you can't pour into that family's bucket, right? If you can't give to that family, just get out, right? Just you got to be honest and say, I can't do it today. I can't meet with that family, put me on phone duty or whatever it is.
Yep.
You have to be emotionally available, and you have to be able to, at a point where you can give, which is, you see a lot of older, jaded funeral directors, and you're like, oh man, you should have bailed a while ago.
Yeah.
Not saying they're not good at their job, and not saying they don't have empathy, but you're just like, you kind of lost that vibe, that love for the people, and you've got to love the people that walk through the door, because if you don't love them, how can you do the best for them?
Absolutely. How long do funeral directors normally last in the profession? Do you know? Is it
not sure?
Can you go like a whole standard career? I don't know that anyone has that emotional availability.
I know that there's people I work with who have done like 20 plus years. I know that I've heard of people who've done 40 years. I think it's a lot easier if you own your own funeral home, because you see you see the rewards, right? Yeah. Like you see the cash in your bank account type deal. Like, I mean, there's a lot of money in funerals. Like, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of money to be made there as someone who owns their own funeral home. If you can get it off the ground, it's all about marketing and appropriate marketing too. Like, yeah. So yeah, there is people around who've been in the industry for a while, and there's a lot of people who come in and go, "Holy crap!"
Yeah,
and exit fairly quickly. But as long as you've got empathy for the people that you're working for, that's the biggest part of being a funeral director, and you got to love the people that walk through the door. You got to be able to sit down and connect with them in a way that is meaningful, and that they don't feel like, what am I trying to say? They don't feel like you're just there to do a job. Because I'm not, right? Like when I started in the industry, I was offered 2 jobs at the same time. One was like a business development manager for some, I don't know, selling card printers or some nonsense. And it was like, there was heaps more money. It was for a lot more, but I went with my gut and went with funeral directing, and I walk away most days feeling like I've done the best by people. So that's a big plus.
Much more fulfilling.
Yeah, right. Like, the money wouldn't fulfill me. Yeah. It's about walking away having catered to someone's needs, and almost ministerially in a sense that I've given that family everything I can. I've given absolutely everything I can, everything they've asked for, and delivered it so that they can farewell their loved one. So, yeah.
Sounds like you made the right call there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, before this, I didn't hold down a job for more than a year. So, and yeah, since I've been doing it, I haven't had thought for a moment that I want to do something else. So
that's awesome. So, Gravy Boat, you got any problems for us to solve?
Yeah. Look, honestly, my biggest problem, and it's always been my problem my whole life, is getting my ass out of bed in the morning.
You've come to the wrong place.
Every single week someone will say a problem, you go, well, you come to the wrong place.
We can only address our problems, people. We don't have time for yours, even though we have a segment for it.
Like, it's not even waking up. Like, waking up's fine, but
getting out?
It's the process of literally taking the blankets off me and getting up.
Literally stay in bed for an hour on my phone before getting up. I'll wake up at 8:30 and I'll stay in bed for an hour.
Me too.
Weekends it rolls around to 11 o'clock and I'm like...
But I may as well have just slept the rest of... Like, I should have just slept, but I didn't. I just stayed on my phone.
I've still wasted the time.
You know what's funny though too? To this day, I still have my alarm set to 7:30 and I won't get out of bed at least an hour. Like why? You know?
Like, it's aspirational, right?
But every day...
Tomorrow could be the day that I get up at 7:30.
It's never the day. And...
Not the last 25 years, it's not anyway.
But I know as well, I'd be so much happier if I got up and like had a coffee. Like the night before,
I'm happier in bed.
I romanticize like getting...
I know I'm happier in bed and I don't want to go out there.
Well then, I feel like your solution then should just be accept it and get up late.
Yeah, except that I have stuff to do.
But then you're not going to do it anyways, right? Like,
yeah.
So,
but okay, the thing is even if I woke up at 10 o'clock, I would still stay on my phone for an hour, maybe 30 minutes, but I would still stay on my phone for a ridiculous amount of time.
Yeah, that's true.
I have to set my alarm an hour earlier than I plan to actually get up so that I can do my whole be on my phone for an hour and do nothing.
I've done had big nights, stayed up really late, 3, 4 a.m. And I get up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm still not getting up until 3, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was a while ago, but it's that's still the case.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what time it is.
I think it has to be the only way that I've actually ever had I recently, a week or two ago, I had a week of consistent good sleep. It's my biggest achievement that I've ever had. And I treated my sleep like it was my training, like going to the gym or something. I was like, I need to go to bed. I need to close my eyes and I will just be bored and accept, because I struggle with actually getting to sleep too.
I'm with you on that.
I really struggle with it.
It's my biggest problem.
And so
I mean, besides the getting up bit.
But also the getting up part. Yeah, so I was like, no, I'm going to bed. At this time, I'm putting my phone here, and I just had to make the most conscious decision and not cave to all my impulses. And I just treated it like it was a training session.
But it doesn't matter how much sleep I get, I still can't wake up.
Oh, I was the same.
I can have 10 hours, but I can have 6 hours.
I can sleep 12 hours, and it's the same every day.
Okay, we need to find a sleep expert to get on this podcast, because the amount of times this has come up, it's unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to find an answer for this.
I don't have a solution,
That's
but just
not
know
one of
that
my
you're...
recommendations. I do not have a sleep expert.
Yeah. If you also suffer from this, samesies. So don't worry.
But I feel as well, all of the normal tips, I feel like I've tried. I've cut out alcohol. I've
Boo.
yeah, I've tried everything. I've tried magnesium. I've
Just
turned all the
to get
lights
to
off.
sleep.
I get my phone off for 2 hours. Yeah, but also just to get up as well. That's you need sleep so that you can sleep enough so you can get up. And I don't know.
So I've got sleep apnea, right? So it's different waking up because I'm not exhausted, but it's still the process of waking up is the same. So throughout now that I have a mask and everything, and I'm Darth Vader at night, throughout the day I'm less tired. I guess that's what a normal person is, not tired at 10 o'clock in the morning.
I don't know that feeling. Continue.
But I'm still struggling to actually get out of bed. So
maybe it's just
But I've tried all the things. I've counted sheep at night to try and fall asleep. And I've got up and had a cold shower and magnesium and all the rest of it, and it just doesn't.
Have you tried giving yourself a reason in the morning to get out of bed that you're really looking forward to?
I mean, you people have jobs. Surely that makes you get out of bed. I don't even have that right now.
I live about 3 minutes from work, right? So,
I straight up don't have a reason to get out of bed in the morning because I don't have a job.
So I can get up at 8:15, right? Absolute latest.
Wait, what time do you start work?
8:30.
Copy that.
Right?
I've tended to nail that as well.
That's pushing it shower-wise,
But that's still a reason to get out.
But you know what?
I have nothing.
I hate the stress of the rush in the morning.
I know.
And
I'm
still
still
do it.
Hang on, my phone's going.
I'm having
I've
never seen this, but I'm having images of Sam super mad in the morning, flustered because he didn't pack his things the night before.
No, but it's fine because I work from home. So I wake up and I go and I sit in my chair.
Yeah.
But it's not ideal because I'm not super fresh to start the day, am I? I just woke up.
Yeah, I was supposed to have an 8:30 lecture on Monday mornings. It got changed to a pre-recorded one, but I straight up would go in my pajamas with a blanket around me, be like, I'm just logging on and I'll go make a coffee and you can just see my little bubble online.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a recurring problem that we should deep dive into further.
Yeah.
So thanks for bringing that to us. I mean, it sounds like...
If you want this problem solved, you need to share our podcast. That's a prerequisite. We won't solve this problem until you go and promote us. Thanks.
Unless you already are a sleep therapist, in which case...
Please come on the
reach out.
podcast.
Please reach out. Yeah, if any of our listeners know anyone who's in that kind of work, please let us know.
All right. recommendations.
Do you want me to start?
Yep.
All right.
I still have nothing.
Enthusiastic.
I have been thinking about this all day. I didn't forget. I just have nothing to recommend.
All right. So
I have something to recommend. Sorry.
All right.
I found it.
All right, good. So I have two. My first one is what I always recommend the radio be turned to, or whenever anyone's ever wondering about music, my recommendation is always Blink-182.
I wonder who this guest is.
It's a mystery, right?
Is there a specific song or album? Or?
All of them. Now, I have a second recommendation.
Okay.
And it's for those who are more interested in funeral-y type stuff. It's on Netflix. It's called Casketeers. It is so good. It's not gruesome. It's nothing like what we've talked about tonight. He's really funny. He's a Maori guy who has a funeral home, and it's really, really good.
Like, is it safe for me to watch?
Yeah, you can watch it.
Okay.
So it's a comedy.
No, it's like a reality show, right? It's about it's literally a real funeral home.
So I would think a reality show was like Big Brother.
No, not reality,
Love
but
Island.
like documentary style.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
So like,
imagine a reality TV show around funeral directing.
No. So it's like it just
trademark that.
It's documentary style where it follows them, and most of it's just about how much he loves using his leaf blower to clear the leaves off the front path. So it's really funny. For those who are interested in the more like subtle aspects of funeral directing, it's a really good show.
Okay.
And it's also really funny, so highly recommend.
It got the safe for M to watch approval, so if you don't like gruesome things, apparently it's safe.
I chose to recommend something very on brand for this week's episode, and that's Afterlife on Netflix if you haven't seen it. It's Ricky Gervais's show, and it's very much about dealing with death. He doesn't necessarily deal with it super healthily.
No, he does not.
No, it doesn't.
So it's a how to not grieve.
It's a how to not do it, yeah.
Well, it's almost about how to deal with other people who are going through it.
Okay.
In a way, I think, which is super interesting, but it's also pretty funny. I feel like it's a bit R-rated, so may not be for everyone, but I really enjoyed watching it. I don't know that I could re-watch through it because it gets a bit heavy, but
yeah, it's pretty heavy.
It was a good experience, I thought.
It showcases real grief, is what it does.
Yeah,
yeah. It's like true to form. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
My recommendation has absolutely nothing to do with anything we've talked about today, and it is a food. It is a snack food. It is pea crisps because they are delicious. It doesn't sound good, but it's like baked peas, but like crunchy and chip-like, and then they just coat them in like MSG, and it's like salt and vinegar flavored pea crisps, and it is so good. I like the salt and vinegar flavor and the honey soy flavor, but Will loves the wasabi flavor.
Can you say the name of the chips again?
I think it's called pea crisps.
Sounds so terrible.
They'll be tagged. No, but they're so good.
Okay.
They're in like the healthy kind of foods. I think they're gluten free, etc. They're in the health food section of Woolies.
Me, if I'm honest.
Okay, I might have one left in my bag from my snacks yesterday. You can try one.
Chips and gravy is also high on the recommendation list. Blink-182, chips and gravy.
Well, thank you so much, Gravy Boat, for being on the podcast. We really enjoyed having this conversation.
It was super interesting to hear the perspective of death for someone who is,
surrounded by it.
Yeah, and it's normal for you.
Legit. Yeah, it's not where I thought I would be, but it's certainly an awesome place to be. I'm glad. Hopefully, I've opened some ears. Can you open ears?
Some minds. Yeah.
Minds. Hopefully, I've opened some minds to, I don't know, just kind of be more interested in what's happening when someone passes away, and
just normalizing it, right? Like it's not that strange of a thing to talk about.
Yeah, it's really not. And especially the main message is always like, when you're grieving, do what you need to do. Don't sit back and be like, oh, no, no one else wants to say, a final farewell at a viewing. But, like, speak up because you'll regret it 50 years from now. I've heard stories of people being like, oh, for my great-grandmother, I never went and said goodbye to her at the viewing because I wasn't old enough and my parents didn't want me to. And they're still thinking about it like 50 years later, right?
Oh, man.
Get get involved in your loved one's farewell is what I would want people to do. Make your funeral director's life hell. Make him work for it, right?
Yeah.
From a funeral director, you heard it here.
You're paying him enough.
I hope that come back to bite you in the ass.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will.
No.
I'm so glad you guys invited me on, and I'd be happy to come on again if there was more questions and we could think of other things to talk about. I mean,
absolutely. We'd
let
love
us
to
know
see you
if you
back
want to
here.
hear more from Gravy Boat.
There's not much more we can do
I'm
without getting
sure
too gross, I don't think.
Oh, I'm sure everyone always has more questions
then
about
we can
death.
just do a Sam and Gravy episode. And I can tap out of that one.
Sam and gravy sounds all right.
Yep.
Let me know if you want Gravy Boat to just take over the whole podcast, all right?
Yeah, we can just do...
Sam and Gravy.
All right, we're going to end this right here.
Thanks again, Gravy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can subscribe, leave us a review, follow us on Instagram, show us where you're listening by posting and tagging us on Instagram. We also have a Patreon account and you can subscribe there and support us if you'd like.
Also, the music is by The Vinyl Press and you can find them on Instagram at The Vinyl Press.
Yeah, and send us any problems that you have. We want to solve them for you.
Woo!